can't speak. And again, these are functional problems precisely because they are observed in the absence of any kind of organic problem that would be sufficient to cause this kind of illness. In the most recent nomenclature, the APA, American Psychiatric Association, is always revising its nomenclature. And one of the things it does is it keeps shifting the conversion disorders around. It doesn't really quite know what to do with them. Right now, they're classified as a subcategory of what are known as somatic symptom and related disorders. But the point of the conversion disorders is not just that they're somatic symptoms, but they're pseudo-neurological symptoms. They're the kinds of symptoms that would be associated with some kind of problem in the nervous system. And in fact, they appear to be dissociative in nature, in that what's really the problem in, say, hysterical blindness or hysterical deafness is a problem of conscious vision or conscious audition. Here is a very nice recent case from Australia by David Bryant and Kevin McConkey, who got access to a case of visual conversion disorder. This was a person who claimed that she could not see, had no visual experience at all, but competent neurological examination had revealed that there was absolutely no problem with her visual system at all. Based on an earlier experiment that I don't have time to talk about, this is actually a better experiment anyway, Bryant and McConkey put this patient in front of what's known as a three-choice decision task, where there are three switches. You can feel them, so you can actually do this task if you can't see. And she was supposed to learn which switch to press in order to get a reward. A bell would ring, and they'd say, that's the right task. Three-choice decision task, meaning that if you're really blind, okay, you have basically a 1 chance in 3 of pressing the right button. Why is blindness important? Because this three-choice decision task was accompanied by a set of visual cues. There were little LEDs next to each of the switches, and the LED would light up when above the correct switch. And so there was a bunch of phases here. First 9 or so phases, the cue was present. There was also a control phase where these light cues were absent. Then later on, there were various other kinds of manipulations. Those will become clear in a second. In a control condition where the lights were not illuminated, the patient was performing roughly at chance levels. About 37% of the time, she'd pick the right switch, whereas chance performance would be 33%. As soon as the cues were turned on, a light would go on above the correct switch. The patient's performance doubled to about 61%. Later on, they actually told her that there are lights above the switches, and they'll tell you which one is the correct switch to push. Even though the patient claimed that she could not see the lights, still under feedback, her performance went up again to about 75% correct. And when they increased the value of the rewards, so increasing her motivation to select the correct switch, then her performance went up even more. This is not the kind of behavior you would expect to see in a patient who was consciously trying to deny that he or she was seeing. Under those circumstances, you just ignore the light. You'd still be pressing at roughly 33, 35% the chance levels. Here is a patient who had no conscious experience of seeing, but yet whose behavior was affected by the presence or absence of various kinds of visual cues. Again, in the same way that Jane Doe's behavior of dialing her mother's telephone number could be thought of as an expression of implicit memory, then this kind of behavior can be thought of as a kind of implicit perception. The effect of a visual stimulus on behavior in the absence of conscious awareness of that visual stimulus. So in fact, although the current diagnostic nosology classifies the dissociative disorders and the conversion disorders in two quite separate categories, if you look at them psychologically, both of them are examples of a kind of dissociative disorder. In the modern dissociative disorders, amnesia, fugue, multiple personality, derealization, depersonalization, what you're getting is a dissociation affecting conscious memory. Person does not consciously remember things that he or she should be able to remember, but those memories can still influence people's behavior. And here in the conversion disorders, like hysterical blindness, hysterical deafness, hysterical paralysis, you have a person who can't consciously see certain kinds of things, can't consciously perform certain kinds of activities, but yet those automatisms, if you will, are still present and able to be used to guide his or her behavior implicitly. So whether you're talking about the dissociative disorders or the conversion disorders, in both cases we're seeing dissociations between explicit and implicit expressions of perception and memory. So in fact, what we see here is kind of how to unify both the dissociative disorders and the conversion disorders under a single rubric of dissociation. In each of these cases, we see disruptions to either the monitoring or the controlling functions of consciousness. Subjects aren't able to consciously remember things they ought to be able to remember. They don't consciously see things they ought to be able to see. They can't consciously engage in activities that they ought to be able to engage in. These disruptions are not attributable to any clear lesion, brain disease or whatever affecting the brain. And interestingly, they're reversible. They go away. People can recover from these. And you'll remember that one of the cardinal features of central nervous system damage is that it's forever, okay? These dissociative disorders are not forever. Moreover, in each of the cases where it's been studied, there's evidence of intact functioning outside of conscious awareness or outside of conscious control. Again, these dissociations between explicit and implicit memory. Okay, that's the story on the dissociative disorders for now. They're very rare. You see them once or twice in a lifetime if you're lucky. Next time, we'll talk about a phenomenon that has phenotypic similarities to the dissociative disorders, but can be seen all the time in the laboratory, the phenomenon of hypnosis. Thanks very much. We'll see you on Wednesday.